A janitor was mopping the floor backstage when a producer shoved a microphone in her hand and told her to fill in for a singer who refused to go on. She was wearing rubber gloves and had a bucket at her feet. The audience booed before she even opened her mouth. Then she sang one note, and the entire theater went completely silent. By the time she finished, the singer who had refused to perform was standing in the wings, sobbing, because she knew her career was over. The lights of the Manila auditorium were blinding, but Rosa didn't notice. She was focused on the dirty floor beneath her feet, pushing her mop back and forth in steady, practiced strokes. For 5 years, she had cleaned this stage. She had scrubbed it after concerts, after talent shows, after corporate events. She had listened to thousands of singers from backstage, always singing along quietly to herself as she worked, her voice swallowed by the mop bucket and the janitor closet where she ate her lunch alone. That night was the finale of the biggest singing competition in the country. The auditorium was packed with 10,000 people. The 3 judges were legends, artists whose posters hung on the walls of every music store. Backstage, chaos was erupting. The final contestant, a pretty girl with expensive hair and a designer dress, had just locked herself in her dressing room. She was screaming that she couldn't go on, that her voice was gone, that the pressure was too much. Her mother was pounding on the door. The producers were running in circles. The stage manager was pulling his hair out. With 2 minutes of airtime to fill, a producer spotted Rosa. She was in the corner, quietly wringing out her mop. She was 50 years old. Her hands were rough and red from years of cleaning chemicals. Her uniform was stained and faded. The producer grabbed her arm. "You can sing, right? Everyone in this country sings," he said, his voice frantic. Rosa looked at him, confused. "I clean the floors, sir," she said softly. "I don't care. Just get on that stage and stall. Sing anything. Buy us 2 minutes. Before she could protest, he pushed her toward the wings. The host, desperate, was already announcing a special surprise performance. Rosa stumbled into the light, still holding her rubber gloves in one hand. The audience saw her uniform. They saw the mop bucket left behind in the wings. A wave of confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Then someone laughed. Then more people laughed. It was cruel, the kind of laughter that comes from people who feel superior. One of the judges, a famous male rock star known for his brutal honesty, leaned into his microphone. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "Did we run out of contestants?" The audience roared with laughter again. Rosa stood frozen. She looked at the 10,000 faces staring at her, most of them smirking. She looked at the judges, one of whom had already turned to whisper something to the person next to her, dismissing her entirely. For a moment, she wanted to run. But then she thought of her son, waiting for her at home in their tiny shack by the railroad tracks. She thought of how she had sung to him every night of his life, how his eyes lit up when she hit the high notes in the old Kundiman songs her mother had taught her. She closed her eyes. The band, not knowing what else to do, started playing a simple, familiar melody. It was an old folk song, one every Filipino knew. Rosa opened her mouth. The first note was soft, almost a whisper. But it was pure. It was clear. It carried the weight of every hardship, every sleepless night, every moment of joy she had ever known. The laughing stopped instantly. The judge who had been whispering turned back around, her mouth falling open. The rock star who had made the cruel joke sat up straight in his chair, his eyes narrowing with focus. Rosa kept singing. Her voice grew stronger, richer, filling every corner of the massive auditorium. She was no longer a janitor in a stained uniform. She was a mother, a woman, a soul laid bare. She sang of love and loss, of hope and struggle. Tears began to stream down the faces in the front row. Then the middle rows. Then the back. The judges were gripping the edge of the table, leaning forward as if pulled by an invisible force. When she finished the final note, the silence was so complete you could hear the hum of the stage lights. Then, the rock judge stood up. He put his hands together and began to clap. The other judges joined him. The audience exploded. 10,000 people rose to their feet, screaming, crying, cheering. The sound was deafening. Backstage, the dressing room door opened. The young contestant who had refused to perform stepped out, her face streaked with tears. She had heard everything. She walked past her mother, past the producers, and stood in the wings, watching Rosa take bow after bow. The girl knew, in that moment, that she had just witnessed something she could never compete with. She quietly walked out a side door and never came back. Rosa didn't win a trophy that night. She didn't get a recording contract or a cash prize. But as she walked back to her mop bucket, the stage manager stopped her. He was crying. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a card from all 3 judges, each one writing a personal message. The rock star had written, "You taught me what music really is." A week later, Rosa was back mopping the same floor. But now, people stopped to talk to her. Young singers asked for her blessing. The producers offered her a paid seat in the audience for every show. She always smiled and politely declined. "I belong here," she would say, tapping her mop. "This is where the music lives." One evening, as she was cleaning the empty auditorium, she heard footsteps. It was the rock star judge. He walked onto the stage and sat down on the edge, looking at her. "Sing something," he said quietly. Right now. Right now." She leaned her mop against the wall. She opened her mouth, and the empty auditorium filled with sound. No microphones. No band. Just her voice, echoing off the walls. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "You know," he finally said, "I spent 20 years thinking I was the best. Then I met a woman with a mop bucket who reminded me that talent doesn't care about your shoes or your clothes or your money. It just finds who it wants." He stood up, walked over, and handed her a backstage pass on a lanyard. "It's for life," he said. "Anytime you want to come. Not to clean. Just to listen. Or to sing." Rosa looked at the pass. She slipped it into her pocket and picked up her mop. "Thank you," she said. "But I think it'll keep working. Gives me something to do while I wait for the next person who needs a song." And to this day, if you visit that auditorium in Manila, you might see a woman in a janitor's uniform humming while she works. And if you listen closely, you'll realize it's the most beautiful sound in the building. Before we go, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop a comment and tell me which part of the country you are in. I read every single one.